what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Ghostly Discussions. As always, I'm Noah.
I'm Gage.
And we got a really interesting one for you guys today. Since it's Halloween, we figured, why don't we do a Halloween edition one where we kind of talk about a lot of our favorite things about Halloween, some of the things that kind of tie into some of the stuff that we do. Like I said, we got a lot of cool stuff today, so I'm going to go ahead and let Gage kind of start it off.
Well, we're going to talk about Halloween and how it originated and kind of how it is today. Halloween originated in the Celtic festival of Samhain, and it was originally a day where they believed where the veil from living to dead was at its thinnest, so the spirits, evil and good, could walk amongst the living. And to protect themselves, they would wear masks so that the evil and good spirits couldn't identify who was around. They would light bonfires on top of hills to try to ward the evil spirits away. And even like stuff like jack-o'-lanterns was done by the Irish and the Scottish to ward off evil spirits, because they also believed that this day was the thinnest of the veil. So stuff like that we do today, like with jack-o'-lanterns and trick-or-treating and costumes, it all originated from back then when people believed that it was to ward off evil spirits that was walking among us. Trick-or-treating got its start because people believed that they would dress up as spirits and then they would get offerings for the spirits, since the spirits couldn't get the offerings themselves. So even costume, and that's where we got the idea for trick-or-treating.
Right, that's pretty crazy how like something like that just started out as like a little festival to kind of ward off spirits and everything kind of turned into this global phenomenon is like as Halloween is in today's world. And just all the crazy different things that you see around that, as far as like witches and everything. Haunted houses are a big thing. Like you said, trick-or-treating is a big thing. Which, real quick, as far as that, I want to send a little bit of a shout out to a haunted house that we went to not too long ago, known as the Infernum in Terra, which is located in
Wheeling, West Virginia.
Yeah, Wheeling, West Virginia. Really, really cool haunted house that we went to. The thing that I liked the most about it was the fact that it was kind of like practical horror, to where it wasn't like on a big budget that you might see at some of the bigger ones like Fear in Columbus or the Seven Floors of Hell in Cleveland. It was just a small budget type of thing, to where it just used a lot of practical horror. Like, I remember my favorite part of the haunted house was where you went down to the basement and they used a lot of props to kind of make it like a maze down there. And it was really dark, really creepy. You never knew where you was quite going. You never knew what might jump out at you from around the corner. So I just thought that it was really good. And I love seeing that kind of stuff. Like, just kind of like, again, the spirit of this holiday. It's definitely my favorite holiday, as far as it just always has been. I love the horror movies. I love dressing up. I mean, I know my buddy Gage here. He definitely loves Halloween.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite holidays. You got all the spooky and scary movies playing year month round. You got candy, all the kids dressing up, passing out candy. You got the veil that's at its thinnest on Halloween night. It's supposed to be the spooky night. It just ties into everything I love anyway, so it's one of my favorites.
Right.
But like even Halloween, like in the States, it's been around for a long time, almost since the States were founded. And a big example of that is the Salem witch trials.
Right.
But
that's a huge point on that, where the kind of like, to this day, probably one of the most famous, you want to call it a case?
Yeah.
Kind of like most famous cases, as far as like, especially witches. I think that's kind of where like where it kind of got its start. The famous Salem witch trials.
Yeah. I mean, back then, they didn't know if there might have been a few people who were actually performing witchcraft, which we know now is like nothing crazy. But even then, back like back then you might have just been able to like do something weird, like have be double jointed and move your arm backwards, and if you were a female and could do that, they would look at you as a witch because you could do something abnormal from a normal, like from reality, and that caused a lot of people to freak out because they were not used to that, so they just claimed witch.
Right. It's definitely interesting how the Salem witch trials got its start to where, like you said, they believed that all of these women were doing things as witchcraft, which might have started out where somebody was doing something kind of weird, sacrificing animals. Who knows what they were doing that they thought was weird, but it possibly, like, it kind of blew up into this thing to where, like you said, they would do anything that was sort of abnormal that they found weird, so they would just instantly say that, like, oh, they were a witch and they need to be hung, burned at the stake. And the thing that's interesting to me about it is the fact that it possibly could have been even blown up to the point where it was almost used as a political or publicity. Yeah, like almost like a political stunt. You know, because you would probably have cases where, since back in those days, men were typically the ones that kind of ran the town and everything, and you'd have a situation where maybe a man was in a relationship with a woman and it wasn't going the way that he wanted it to, or whatever was going on, and he possibly could have used that to kind of get revenge or whatever he wanted out of that situation by using that kind of as like as blackmail almost.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting because in today's terms, as far as like witchcraft, it is kind of like watered down a little bit, just because everywhere you go, you hear of something that's known as witchcraft. Because witchcraft in today's terms could be something as simple as people that believe in crystals or using black sand. Actually, I think you could even say that Ouija boards are almost a form of witchcraft in today's terms.
Maybe.
Just because, in the simple fact that, like, communicating with the dead, like, through the veil, and sage can be used as far as can be known as witchcraft almost. It's like, that's what I mean. Like, anything that is remotely magical or spiritual can be jotted down to witchcraft, and I think that's why, in today's terms, it's a lot different. It's not seen as evil, or it's not seen as, it's just more of spirituality almost.
Yeah, but even like today's movies, they tie in that. A big one that we watch, probably most of us have watched, is The Conjuring.
Right.
It's based off of a witch that was also part of the Salem witch trials.
Yeah, Bathsheba was her name. Known as from the famous Conjuring movie, which comes from Ed and Lorraine Warren, who honestly is coming from paranormal investigators. Ed and Lorraine Warren are kind of like our idols in the sense that they weren't the first paranormal investigators like in history, but they definitely were the ones that blew it up.
Yeah.
Like they were the ones that really made it famous, and all the crazy stories that they have, and a lot of the most of the movies that you'll probably go out and see as that tie into that are from their case files. Like, look at the Conjuring series, Annabelle series, the Amityville Horror. Like, all that stuff comes from them. And the thing with the witch from the first movie, The Conjuring, Bathsheba, and this kind of ties back into the witches thing, and why it is an interesting topic is because back in those days, every time you brought up a witch, it's instantly kind of seen as evil, like almost Satanism, to where like they worshiped the devil and they were the one that were conjuring the demons.
She was evil in the movie because she did sacrifice her newborn son. Right.
That was kind of like the.
And then she was possessing people to do the same thing, sacrificing their kids.
Right.
And that was what basically the first Conjuring movie was about.
Yeah, it was just this whole idea of just evil when it comes to witches, and as far as like the Satanism and like what you're saying, like all that kind of crazy crazy stuff that they did.
Sacrificing your son to the devil. They didn't even look at it as if it was their son. They looked at it as if it was their pawn to the devil.
Just property almost, just to do with as they please. Like, I think a lot of times they would conceive literally just so they had that like blood sacrifice almost.
It's possible.
I don't, because I'd have to look more into it, because I remember seeing something about like, because I think as far as when it comes to like the witchcraft and everything, I think there was something different between like just doing an animal sacrifice and then like flesh and blood, like your flesh and blood sacrifice. I think it signified something different when it came to that kind of stuff. Which, yeah, if you guys have the opportunity, look that stuff up, because it's all really pretty interesting stuff.
But even from aside from like movies that you see now that are been dramatized or from Hollywood, you have old classic Halloween films like the slashers, where a lot of those slashers, like you got Friday the 13th, Michael Myers with Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street with Freddy Krueger.
Right.
They've all been, they're all like a staple of Halloween today.
Oh, for sure.
But I mean, they're different from movies that you see now, because there's not really much of a plot. It's more of just the gore and the killing that gets everybody. And even though there's still not much of a plot, people, I mean, me and I'm sure plenty of other people still go back and watch them every month of Halloween and probably throughout the year.
Oh, for sure. And it's almost kind of like, it's interesting the different styles of haunted films too, because like, so you take something like the Conjuring series, right, which I think is more related to kind of like paranormal investigating and stuff like that, which ties into kind of like what we do. And then you have like what you're saying, the slashers, and you can almost tie a correlation to them to kind of like serial killers. Mm-hmm. You know, like the slashers aren't based off of anyone real, but it's kind of like that idea that there's something about all that stuff that's either weird or creepy that just everybody is so interested in. Like, think of how many documentaries there are on all the different serial killers, and I think that the slashers try to capture that idea that, you know, that everybody's kind of infatuated with.
Well, I think it's part of the human psychosis to want, like, to understand what goes wrong.
Why they.
Like, see, it's probably not normal, or it might even be normal to see somebody get murdered 13 times in a horror movie, but we, for some reason, us as humans want to go back and we love that.
It's common, right? In like you said before, they are like super dramatized. Like, the thing that has always stuck with me as far as the dramatization of the horror films was the whole story behind the Conjuring series. So, like we said, most of the stuff in the Conjuring series that you see it's not actually true. It didn't happen the way that they said, and there's not really a case file. Like, for instance, in the Conjuring 2 movie, the demon known as Valak that comes and tries to possess them and kill them and everything, it's not actually based off of a true rendition by Ed and Lorraine Warren. It was more of, they had an idea from Lorraine, which
she was seeing a dark hooded figure coming into her home almost every night, and they wanted to portray that in a way. So they got the idea of a nun, and the nun was designed because it was meant to
it's kind of signify her battle
through her faith.
Yeah, battle through her faith.
And they used the term Valak, which is actually in written terms in demonology as a real demon. But in the Conjuring series, you have it as a nun, but in demonology, you have it as a winged child that rides a two-headed dragon. So you can definitely tell there's some big differences there.
Which, the other cool thing about that was the fact that, you know, Ed himself was actually the first demonologist to not be ordained by the church.
Yeah, he was the only one at the time. There might be more now.
There probably is. Actually, I want to say a majority of demonologists now are probably not.
Yeah, he was a self-proclaimed. Well, he was self-taught, and then he was not ordained by a church, but he was recognized as one.
Right.
Demonologist.
And that's actually, to me, that was always like a really impressive feat, because like when it comes to the church itself, is that they're very like by the book. Like what the book says is what it is. And so to allow somebody to be recognized as a demonologist and not be not be ordained by the church, I just always thought that was super impressive. And to me, it kind of speaks volume to how good he was at the craft, and that's kind of like why they're idols to anybody that is in this field.
But then you have her; she was a
clairvoyant.
Yeah, so it was kind of like a psychic medium. She could look at a family photo and see a glimpse of that time. She could see, hear, and feel the spirits that were around in the house.
Right.
She had a lot of powerful gifts that a lot of us, most of us, can't say that we've ever experienced in our lifetime.
Right.
And there are people out there who have the same gifts as her. They have gifts that are not as powerful as hers, and they walk around us today. And we've experienced many of them. We've experienced a couple of them. We've worked alongside one. It changed my idea of how that works whenever seeing what he did.
Clairvoyant is kind of like a fancy word for saying that somebody's a psychic medium, which is kind of what you're getting at, to where you have different kinds of psychic mediums too, because you have like some that are known as empaths, which they kind of claim that they just feel things, and then you have some that are kind of like more towards what Lorraine was claiming to be, where like they hear and see things, which that's a really good interesting point to bring up, which was our investigation with Christopher, who claims to be a psychic medium, because I would almost say the same that it kind of changed the way that I look at him.
Yeah,
in a way.
It was a great investigation.
It kind of opened my eyes to a lot of it, because I think the craziest thing that we had from that specifically was when, or at least the craziest thing that I can say that I believe 100% without a doubt, because there was physical evidence that what he was saying was true, and it was where we was in the basement of the Ross house located in Blair, Ohio, and we were doing an Estes method, but we were kind of trying to do a double Estes method, because we kind of wanted to see Christopher do his craft and his gifts kind of in person. So we put Gage under the headset like always. I was asking the questions like always. And then what we did was we had Christopher sit right next to me with a notepad and a pen, and I just kind of told him, hey, as you hear things or see things, write them down on that paper, and we'll kind of correlate with what he's saying on the headset and see if any of it matches up. And I'm not kidding you when I say that he was literally writing things down at the right before you would say it. Like literally, he would write it, and I'd watch him write it, and then you would say it, and I'd be like, "Oh my God! Like this is happening!" It I had chills that entire time. It was so crazy, and so definitely a lot of that, which, like you said, because you see it so often in today's world, that it's like, there's a lot that I look at now after that experience and I believe, but at the same time, I think there is a lot out there that
people. I mean, a lot of people go to. They want views. They want money.
Right. They do it kind of almost as clickbait. Yeah. Almost.
And I mean, it's the same way with any paranormal investigation. You got shows out there that they'll glorify all their evidence. They might not catch anything, but they'll come up with something to show.
Right, and that's where it's fabricated, and that's the one thing that we here at the Belmont Paranormal Society, we never want to do that.
No, if we don't get any evidence, we're not gonna post it, or we might just post it and say we didn't get anything, or if we got something that we don't understand, we'll either put on there like unknown voice, or we just won't add it.
Right, and the thing is, the things that you see are the exact way that it happened.
Yeah,
we're not trying to over glorify it in any way, because like you said, you'll see it with paranormal investigators, and in the movies they'll take a true story that happened and then they'll kind of over glorify it to make it seem a lot bigger than it was. Like, for instance, back to the Conjuring house, the very first one, a story that they claim is true that happened in the movie is where they were doing an exorcism on the mother of the home who was supposedly possessed by the spirit of Bathsheba. And they were doing the exorcism, and supposedly the mother started to float up in the air, and then she was like tossed across the room from the exorcism. And I'm not necessarily saying that that didn't happen. I'm just saying that I'm a little bit skeptical of that, just for the simple fact that in my personal experience as being a paranormal investigator, I've seen some crazy things as far as like I've been scratched and touched. Our special investigator and friend Kevin has been scratched. You got scratched at the Ross house. So crazy stuff does happen, and I've even seen like things kind of like move slightly. But I've never seen anything actually be physically picked up and to think with somebody as much weight as a human person, like you got real people that can't even pick someone up and throw them across the room. So the idea that she was lifted up in the air and then tossed across the room, I'm not saying that it didn't happen. I'm just saying that I am kind of skeptical of that. And it's just back to like I don't know. It's hard to believe certain things because you're not quite sure if are they doing this to glorify it so people are like, wow, that really happened, and then they want to go there, they want to see it, or did that actually happen? And that kind of is why it's hard for a lot of people to believe anything that paranormal investigators say. Whenever you go into a room and you're talking to people and you're just kind of like, hey, I'm a paranormal investigator, and I'm a believer in the paranormal, these are my experiences and stuff like that. And that's what makes it hard for people to believe. Like, are they being legitimate? Because there's so many things that are over glorified or they're misconstrued to kind of get a different message out there, or for purposes of just higher views, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of makes it hard. But again, it's never something that we want to do. Everything that we're putting out there is 100% legitimate, or is if we don't get anything, we don't put it in there. And sometimes you'll see that in the videos, like where there's stuff that I put in because I don't want to put anything that's fake. I don't want to fabricate anything.
Yeah, we don't do that. But I think that's it.
Yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for today's video. Again, I'm really appreciative of all you guys that come by and stop by every week to watch our videos. We highly appreciate it. This is something that we love to do. I can't wait to continue to get bigger, go to more locations and everything like that. Stay tuned because we actually will be having a video come out here very shortly about the demons themselves. What are demons, our take on them, the whole shebang. We're going to be talking about it in a really long episode on that. So stay tuned for that. Really excited about that. But again, before we go, hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell notifications so you guys get updates every time that we do a video. And we are just so happy to be here. Stay ghostly.